Good morning, Saturday, December 9th, and this is episode 2 of Unstuck Kids Speak Out. In a second, we're going to be joined by Sharif, who is going to be broadcasting in live from, well, hopefully if technology works, from the UAE. So, Unstuck Kids Speak Out, let me just back up a second. My name is Chris. I'm one of the producers of Unstuck. The Unstuck Kids movie, which came out early this summer. It features 6 kids with OCD talking about their issues and how they overcame it. And Unstuck Kids Speak Out is a chance for us to, for you to talk to and also hear from a kid with OCD and get their ideas and perspective. So I'm going to invite, and we can start the conversation. He'll be joining shortly. No, it's too loud. Sharif. Technology worked. Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. Hold on one second. One of my girls are here and they want to say hi.
Okay.
Hi, Sharif.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Me too.
How are you?
No, I'm good.
I'm sure it's nicer there than it is here. It just started snowing.
Oh yeah. It's pretty cold for us, but it's probably nothing for you guys.
Well, yeah, I mean it doesn't get massively cold there, but how are you doing these days?
I'm doing pretty good. It's nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
And were you able to view the film when we sent it to you a couple months ago?
I think my parents were, but I don't have we were looking for a DVD player, but I can't find it. So I haven't viewed it.
After this, I'm going to send you the link so you can see it because it's getting great reception. If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Sharif. This is Unstuck Kids Speak Out episode 2, and we're going to talk about OCD and how he dealt with it, how he's dealing with it now. And feel free to add a comment or a like, and then we'll give Sharif the questions. I know there's probably a bit of a delay, but I just want to go back to when you first were having problems and you really didn't know what OCD was. When did you realize something was wrong?
I think when I was growing up, I just kind of accepted it, and I think that maybe I thought that everyone else kind of had it, but then when I realized that it was kind of interfering with my school life or social life, or when I was just that. What? Yeah, sorry.
And I remember when we were interviewing you, you talked about some things that started to bother you in school with making sure everything was straight or symmetrical and things like that. Mm-hmm. And was it at home or at school where, things really anxiety would really start bothering you?
I think it was more home, because I think when it was school, it was more like tics, because I was just sitting straight and I didn't want to drag attention to myself, but the tics were kind of there, so it was more tics or physical vocal tics in school. But I think at home, because it's my room, so I could fix the things, and maybe I felt more responsible for it. But so yeah, and I think at home it was more making everything symmetrical and stuff.
So your issues came out in different ways in different places.
Yeah.
And what were the things that you used to do to try to the compulsions to relieve the anxiety and fear that you had?
Sometimes I would if it was tics during school, I would maybe pinch myself or try to put my hands under my legs to try not to do something, or really grind my teeth hard so I wouldn't make a noise. And at home, it was if there's something that was bothering me, sometimes if I could fix it, then I would. But if I couldn't, I would maybe like hide it so I couldn't see it, or I would like close my eyes for a bit or like leave the room. Just like,
Ah,
yeah. So kind of like avoiding it instead of like facing it.
um, and were you were aware that the things you were going through might have been different than what your friends were going through?
Yeah. So like,
And
I'm sorry.
and did that make you did it make you feel like alone or scared or frightened? How did I guess so how did that make you feel?
It was it kind of made me feel a bit like, especially when people were saying that was like a bit weird, or like when teachers were telling me to focus, or because maybe it seemed like I wasn't focusing even though I kind of was, or yeah, or like when my friends are saying, or stop doing that, people were saying stop doing that because it bothered them. That's when it kind of made me feel a bit kind of like scared, or not like scared, just like worried and like weird, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you feel who was the first person that noticed, or like who did you talk to or tell?
It's probably my parents because I'm always with them at home. But I guess like probably people from my school noticed like that I had the tics, but obviously they probably didn't know it was just like I did, or they weren't good. It wasn't like I was. It wasn't like they're gonna tell anyone or something. But yeah, probably like my parents or something.
And like, do you remember the first day or the first time somebody might have said to you, "Oh, it's this thing called obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD"? And somebody might have explained it to you. Do you remember like where you were or who told you that or where you read it?
Um, well, I think I remember it was just like I think before they I think I heard them like talking about something like that, but I didn't really know what it was. And then like when I'd be trying to fix something, they'd like just pull me away from it. And then I think they'd be like talking, but I never knew. And then like I learned when we went to New York and we went to like I first saw a therapist, I saw Dr. Rojas, and then she explained to me like what OCD was and that it wasn't weird or anything. It was just something that some people have. Yeah.
And so you started to work with a therapist. You started to like understand what OCD was and different and how it affected you. What do you remember the first I don't know the first issue that you worked on or the first exposure that you did? I'll just give it a second. Sometimes the
The
technology
physical.
freezes, and if we have to, yeah.
Right. I think the first things those were like physical and vocal tics, and it was focusing on like instead of trying to avoid them, maybe like head straight at them or like do exposures to make it like to like face them and try to get rid of them instead of just trying to like ways to avoid them. So like
Mm-hmm.
maybe realizing that you have the tick and then instead of pinching yourself or something, just focusing on something else and then like create a thing to focus on. And so I think it was like SpongeBob or something like TV related when I first had it. And so every time I like have a tick, I just think of that and then try to make it go away instead of like just pinching myself or doing something to try to avoid it.
Now, I'm one of the hard things that I think people without OCD have, or people that are trying, like parents, myself, trying to understand how it actually, I can't relate to how it really makes you feel when you have an issue. But one of the things that sometimes we talk about is okay, and so I want to ask you, something that's really hard for you to do in life, like is like your hardest subject in school. How does that compare to when like your anxiety is really hard? Like, I'm just trying to get like a context so people understand
Yeah.
this is how it really affects you.
No, I think it's kind of like if you're in a subject and you're like trying really hard to get this concept, but you just can't lock it down, even though you're like studying a lot and you're focusing on it a lot. But, like when it comes to like a test or something, you just can't like that you don't remember the things, but you can't just apply it. I think that's kind of like what OCD is, because you'll do all these things and then you think it's finally gone away, but like it still just comes back and you don't know how to get rid of it, so you just get really frustrated. And that's when it can like take over a lot easier.
Yeah. If you're just joining us and you want to ask a question, this is Sharif, and we're talking OCD, getting a kid's point of view. So if you have a question and you want to, Sharif's an expert. He's gone through therapy. He deals with OCD periodically, but he's one of the kids we used in the film, so he knows what he's talking about. So feel free to add a comment, and we'll throw it out to him. Do you remember when you were in New York? Starting therapy, did you meet other kids that were going through treatment as well?
I think my therapist told like stories of some other kids and how like they approached it, and some of them were like a lot worse than mine. So I think it helped me like, and there was a couple specific ones, but I can't remember because it was so long ago. But I don't think I ever got to meet any. But yeah.
When you left New York, I think one of the interesting things about your story is that you were doing therapy via like this, through like a video conference, right?
Mm-hmm,
and
yeah.
So how was that? So like, my daughter Vanessa goes to her therapist, and she sits in an office. Did you did you have a set time and appointment where you sat down with your computer screen with your therapist back in New York, or how did that work?
Well, we had usually like Skype sessions every week or every 2 weeks here, and then if we had a chance, or like during winter break or during summer, I'd go and I'd see her, and then she'd like give me something physically, or we'd have a longer sort of chat. But I don't know, I think it was really good because I don't think there are many like good, or we don't even have access to many good therapists here. And like the schedule was worked out so that like she could do it in the morning, we could do it at night. So I think it was just as good as like seeing it in person, because I could see her, and like I was at home, so we could do it whenever and have to like walk or take a break there.
Wait, so actually, that I know I don't think I ever asked you this, but like, did you take your laptop into your bedroom and mess things up on purpose, and she would tell you what to do while you were there? Because I know sometimes one of the things Vanessa did with her therapist was they would go places and she would purposely make Vanessa anxious.
I think sometimes we would, I think we talk about it, and then I think sometimes, because a lot of it was in my locker, like hubbies, and so she would like tell me to purposely mess up things. And I think there are some times where there was like, if there was something in my room that was like specifically bothering me that day, then I would like angle the computer so she could see it, and then I'd like purposely change something about it, and then I'd have to like stare at it the whole time and not change it.
And was it fun for you to do that? Was it hard and then it got easy? How would you describe the exposure therapy that you were doing?
I think first, because I didn't understand what it was, I thought it was kind of mean, and I was like, why are you doing this to me? And I didn't really realize what the point was. But then after a while, you just forget about it, and then you realize that, oh, I had this thing, it was messed up the whole time, but it didn't really affect me at all. I'm still like the same person after.
And now I'm remembering some of the things that you were telling us when we interviewed you, that like, you really had to work mentally in thinking about the fact that you and OCD were different things. And that, that's a lot of hard work for, how old were you when you were really going through that?
I was probably like 8 or 9 maybe, or like 7. Yeah, like 7, 8 when it first started. So yeah, it was kind of, I think it was really hard to understand just like the context of the exposure stuff. So that's why it was really hard.
Yeah. The did your family get involved and help you out too?
Yeah, they did.
Hi, Zoe.
It helped me with a lot of the what's it called? They helped me with a lot of the exposure stuff and the just the like messing up things, and they'd make sure I would be doing the things that she told us instead of like purposely doing ticks.
That's you had the added issue of the dealing with the tics. Now, can you explain? We didn't really talk about that in the film, but tics are certainly something that comes up with kids with OCD. What were some of the things that you would describe as your tics?
So some of them, I think like half of them are vocal. It kind of half were like vocal and physical. So some of them would be like making a gagging sound, or like making a yip sound, or kind of like fake coughing sometimes even. And then the physical ones would be, I know, like moving my stomach was a big one, or it's kind of like pinching something or scratching at something, I guess. I don't know. It was kind of like different each, like, and they changed like each day or each week or something.
So they altered. And then how long would you say you were dealing with the exposure therapy? By the way, hi Gloria, and hi Zoe, nice to meet you. If you have a question for Sharif, just type it in there and I can ask it. This is interactive, so anybody out there has a question, feel free to just add a comment or share it so your friends can see this broadcast. When you were going through therapy, it can take different amount of times. How long do you think it took you to kind of like get on top of some of the issues that you were having?
There were some of them that were like easier than others, but I think usually it would take like a couple weeks of, like for the bigger ones, it took me a couple weeks of like really trying to focus on like specific ones and focusing on specific methods that were like different for each one that would work, and then I'd have to practice them. And then sometimes like it would be easier to just forget about it, and so I would like not do it for a week and then have to restart again. So yeah, I would take in the week, and then usually a couple would go away, but then the problem was that they keep coming back, and so I'd have to like consistently think of new strategies to beat each one.
Did you try to make it, some families, they go right at it every day. Did you make a schedule to do it? I got to do it this time or every day. And like, how was your family involved in helping you out with dealing with your exposures and helping with OCD?
Well, for the schedule part, we had like sometimes she'd be like, okay, every day try to do these few things or do these, or like think of this, make sure to like notice the tick at least 5 times or something, and then think of something else and not do it. And so that would, and then my parents, like when they're at home, they would really help me with making sure I was noticing it and not like letting go of myself, and then talking to me about like maybe if I had a specific tick that I would like tell them, or they would ask me if anything else was coming up. And so yeah, we could have like another booster session if we needed to.
Yeah. I know it was very hard for my wife and I because OCD, at least in our house, would rope us into things. And do you think it was hard for your parents to, like some of the things that you were doing, were you involving them in your rituals or compulsions?
I guess sometimes that they would like, we would be like, if it was like at the dinner table or something, then they would be like directly involved with trying to help me. But usually they were just like really helpful with helping. Usually they're really helpful with just like supporting me with the things that like they couldn't really help with. So like, yeah.
And the reason I was asking that question, because it was, do you think it was hard for them to, in some ways, not help you? You're dealing with an issue, they can see you struggling or maybe really frustrated or get angry, and then their job is to kind of not do the thing that's going to make you feel better. Do you think it was hard for them?
Probably a bit, especially like when sometimes I think she would say that like to tell my parents that purposely like don't try to help and like make sure that I would try to do something myself. So I guess this would so it would probably like struggling, especially like when I'm not doing it, but like she told them to not. She told like therapist told my parents to not help, so it would kind of be like I'm struggling and they could help me, but in like the long run, it would be better if I did it by myself and I learned that like not doing the exposures would hurt me in the long run.
Yeah. I have a question here from someone here in the U.S. wanting to know how when you had thoughts in class in school, how did you handle that? Like, what were the ways, because there's a lot of kids around, a lot of activities, what were some strategies you used to make sure that OCD didn't bother you in school?
Sometimes I would, because usually it would happen when we were all just like sitting and the teacher was telling us something. Sometimes it would be focusing on what the teacher was saying, or like maybe if it was something that I already knew, it would be focusing on like one specific word that she said. Like maybe she started a sentence with you, I just think of that word for the whole sentence if I didn't really need to pay attention that much. But yeah, and sometimes even like I would tell, like, I think later when it was kind of getting a big issue, I think we told our teacher that that was an issue, and like we told my teachers, and so they would, like, I think sometimes they would help me with like if they noticed me doing a lot, they'd tell me, like they just help me notice it, and then I would do my exposure controls if when I noticed it again.
So that's actually the next question that I was going to ask. And somebody said, how did your teachers help? So did you and your family sit with your school or your teachers and say, this is the issue, this is what's going on, here's how to help them? Oh, we got a delay on the technology, but we'll be back in a second. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. Hey, Dr. Durgam. And Gloria, Zoe, or whoever's on, we'll get to that answer in a second as soon as we get Sharif back in. This is Unstuck Kids Speak Out. Ask questions. I got a few more for him. We're going to invite Sharif back in, and I got a few more questions for him. But hey, Danica, you can certainly throw your questions in, and it's a chance for, a lot of times you hear from experts and adults and they tell you one thing or technical thing, and this is a chance to talk to a kid, and there he is. Hey, Sharif again. So the question we were just talking about was how do you deal, how did you involve your teachers in your school in helping out with your therapy?
So with my school, sometimes I think we did have like a chat with them where we would sit down, where like my parents and I would sit down and we'd talk to them and tell them about the issue, and then I'd explain some of the tics I had, and turn that off, and explain some of the tics I had, like vocal and physical, so when they saw me, they wouldn't maybe they wouldn't say that I was like unfocused or I was like bored in class and trying to like annoy my friends, or just something that wasn't, like it was something that it was out of my control and I was really trying to get rid of. And so that really helped with, they're a lot more, after that they're a lot more understanding and they were like helping me notice and stuff.
Yeah. When you, now, a lot of the issues that you had were things being perfect and, writing and rewriting. Clearly that has to do a lot with schoolwork. What were some ways that you got over, that feeling of perfectionism, or understanding that it is okay to do things a little, have a mistake or not be exactly perfect?
I think I remember one of the classes we had was handwriting and like cursive and making sure each letter was under the line and stuff. And Normally, like obviously one of the biggest things to do would just like to make a mistake on purpose, or if you had a mistake, just keep it there instead of erasing it. And then that would kind of like if you did one mistake, then you'd realize that it was fine and it allowed you a lot easier to do more mistakes. So I think that really helped. But one thing, yeah, I don't know. I think that was the biggest thing, just like making sure to do it on purpose or leave it when it's there.
Now, do you remember, you didn't just go from one day being like everything has to be perfect, and then the next day being like, all right, I'm going to be okay with this. Were there little steps that you took to say, okay, I'm going to mess up one word, or I'm going to mess up two words, like how you got to that way where you could be okay with it?
I think so. I think it was like making sure like messing up one letter and then messing up two letters or messing up three, whatever. And I think at the start when it was like messing up one letter, maybe instead of being like, okay, well now that I messed up one, I realized nothing bad happened to me. I was still like, okay, I messed up one, so not all the rest have to be perfect. So I don't think I really understood like what the practice was, or like it was still kind of hard for me to get out of being perfect. And then yeah, eventually we would keep upping it up. And I think there's some days where I was fine if I made a couple of mistakes, and then there's some days where I was like really sad, or not really sad, but like really frustrated with myself. I keep making mistakes and I wouldn't do my exposure. And then so like that variation happened like in the middle, which is really tough. But then after I got over that, it became a lot easier to and I was like a lot more consistently fine with making mistakes and stuff. Or like it wasn't even like maybe if someone else made a mistake, I wouldn't like correct them or something. And so yeah.
So do you almost, so if I'm kind of, it's like once you realize that you were having some victories, it got easier and easier to fight.
Yeah. Especially, yeah. So once, sorry.
How are you doing now?
Now I think for that part it's a lot easier. And especially with the perfectionist thing, I think that's almost completely gone. And I think that's something where if you have enough examples of instances in which you're annoyed that you have to be perfect, and then you get rid of it after a while, everything like you don't need the exposures anymore. But I think it takes a lot of like maybe you'll be really good with okay, I made a mistake with my writing, that's fine. But then if you're like I made a mistake in sports, that's not fine, and that can take a lot more like effort and so. But I think if you keep doing it with a lot of different things like writing or sports or maybe drawing or with a lot of different subjects, eventually it becomes a lot easier. And then when something new is introduced, you don't need to do the exposure, or maybe you only do it for like a day or something.
Yeah, and you keep moving to different things.
Yeah.
This is Unstuck episode 2, Kids Speak Out. We're talking to Sharif. If you have a question or you want to ask him about how he deals with OCD, feel free to leave a comment. Sharif, now that the film is out there and your story is being told a little bit more and you're helping kids, have you ever had a situation in your school or with friends there where you've been able to help them with issues they've had?
I don't think any. I haven't really encountered anyone with OCD in my school, but there are some people that had like ADHD in my school, and there's one friend I had that had ADHD, and sometimes I think it is a lot different because it was, and so I didn't really understand as well as he did, and he probably didn't understand OCD as well as I did. But I guess sometimes I could help by like being a lot more understanding if they weren't focusing or something, and like not. And so like I didn't know what practices he had, but maybe sometimes if he was kind of unfocused or like doing something like kind of like a tick, I guess, I wouldn't really say like, oh, stop that, that's weird. Or I just kind of be more understanding and try to help him out as well as I could. So I think that was, yeah, so sometimes like that. I think just being more understanding was like the best I could do, I think.
Well, I mean, it's a big help when you kind of have something that's similar to have empathy is really important because like you said earlier on, you were feeling alone when you had it. You didn't really, what the heck is this OCD thing? And then to have somebody that you can at least identify a little bit with, certainly kind of helps both of you feel stronger and also feel, feel like you have somebody that you can trust.
Yeah, I think trusting was really good, especially, yeah.
I got just a couple more questions for you. If anybody wants to ask Sharif a question about how he deals with OCD, feel free to throw in a comment. One thing I always have to ask is, OCD right now always is being used, or a lot of times people who don't understand it, they use it as a, as an adjective. OCD, I feel like things have to be clean. That's my OCD acting up, and they don't really understand. So what do you say to people who use that phrase, in place of just saying like they're neat or they're clean, the whole I'm OCD thing?
Yeah. Before it kind of bothered me a lot because, especially when I was dealing with it, because I always had all these frustrating thoughts, and it's like, oh, you can't possibly, like, especially when they'd see something, and say like, oh, I'm so OCD, but then they do something that like completely goes against that like 2 seconds later, and so it kind of like annoyed me a bit because I was going through this really hard thing and they didn't have to, but after a while I just kind of got over it, and I think that I just kind of accepted it as the way I like kind of like a term of them saying that, oh, like I want everything to be clean, which is fine, I guess. So yeah.
It's almost like we have to tell people there are different words to use, and that, using a mental health illness isn't the shortcut.
Yeah.
So 2 questions for you. One, when a lot of times with OCD, you feel like you're stuck in your thoughts, that you can't get over that one thing. It's in your brain all the time, and it's really hard to get over it. What are some ways that, you were able to get unstuck from, your thoughts?
I think it's different for a lot of people because like when I hear more stories from OCD, sometimes people would say strategies that I didn't think would work for me, but for me it was really a lot of like directly focusing on the thing instead of trying to avoid it. So if I had like this one thing, maybe I was like trying to focus on my schoolwork, but there'd be this one thing that kept coming up. I would, for a bit, I would like focus on that. I would like think of a thought, and when that comes up, I'd realize it, and instead of focusing on it and like making it stronger, I would realize it while I'd be like, okay, that's there, but I'm just not gonna focus on it. And then it doesn't really, for a lot of times, it doesn't really work. Like especially when it was really bad, that strategy didn't work a lot, or like it didn't provide the temporary relief that maybe like thinking about it did. But after a while, if you keep thinking about it, if you keep just noticing it and then not thinking about it, noticing it, not thinking about it, then it becomes a lot smaller and it becomes a lot easier to just focus on other things, and then it goes away eventually.
I mean, a lot of the things about exposure therapy, and I know I'm just kind of going to address somewhat of a question somebody had, is it's not about solving the problem that day. It's about trying it over and over and over and training yourself to understand that what Sharif just said, you sometimes might have that temporary relief. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But over time, you learn, you're kind of getting a new habit forming, and that makes you stronger. So it's not something that you're going to be stuck in your thoughts. It's not something that goes away in a day or a week. But you were saying you were 7 or 8, and now you're much older. And so it takes can take a few years, and you have to keep at it. I have a question here about exposures in sports. So I know you play soccer.
I play basketball, I think. Yeah.
Basketball.
Yeah.
All right. So you were talking about, so how do your anxiety sometimes affect you playing basketball?
I think basketball is like a good sport to really help OCD for me because it's really fast paced. And so sometimes maybe I'd mess up like a shot, or I just like dribble badly and I'd know exactly what I messed up, and I just keep focusing on that one thing that I messed up. But like or sometimes I'd be doing that, but then I'd be like, I wouldn't be focusing on the next thing, or I wouldn't be guarding my guy, so I would be like a detriment to my team. And so it kind of forces you, if you want to play well and if you want to like focus on the game, it forces you to like forget. It forced me to forget the little things and little things I messed up on and just keep going. And so yeah, so I like yeah.
I attended a panel at the OCD conference this summer with a lot of sports stars, a lot of hockey guys. A couple goalies were there, and they were talking about how they felt like their OCD pushed them in certain ways, but that actually ended up being a detriment. And then there was actually some therapists there who said they've done studies, and they found that people with OCD feel like their OCD is helping them be better and their performance be better. But in actuality, it actually holds them back because they are driving themselves too hard. So sports can be a thing where you really try to work very hard and like perfect something. You feel like in basketball, when you know that you missed a shot, that you're practicing that shot all the time, or you're able to let it go.
Hey, sorry, what was the question again?
The question is more like, a lot of times in sports, you feel like your drive to be, you were talking about being perfect. So you feel like you have to be perfect. You have to make the best shot. You have to play all the time. And do you feel like that your OCD is making you try harder or work harder?
Well, I think in some situations it kind of helps because you're able to like perfectly pinpoint what you messed up on, or like you're able to think of something that you could mess up on, and then it's easy to like you don't forget it, and so you know what to work on. But I think it's also kind of a detriment because then like you just really instead of just practicing to get better, you're practicing to maybe you're just focusing on that one spot and not everything else that you need to be focusing on. So like maybe you'll kind of get better at that one thing, but in turn everything else will kind of get worse because you're not focusing on it.
So you're actually, as you're playing basketball, you're reminded of how to almost do an exposure or fight your OCD and stop yourself from really being totally particular about certain shots or certain things you're doing.
Yeah, so I think with fast-paced things like that, it kind of helps you to focus on like, and even maybe if you messed up that one shot, but you might mess up that one shot, but you can still win the game, or you can still get 5 other shots that you got in because you weren't focusing on that one thing. And so it helps you to like forget about the things and realize that they don't really matter once they've happened.
Yeah, and I hear Morgan. Yeah, we hear you. The phrase "I'm so OCD" it's really overused. It's one of those things where over time in education, people will understand. It's just like a lot of things. There are people who use ADHD in that way. There are people who they use mental health illness as a shortcut because they don't want to say, or they don't feel like saying I'm clean, I'm anal, I'm meticulous. So hopefully over time in education, things like this, we have little kid experts who can share the story and they've been through it, and the next generation will help stop it. So one of my last questions for you is, when you were dealing with therapy or even now, are there any books or resources that you can recommend to people to check out?
I don't think I had that many like books or resources. I think it was more specific things that my therapist targeted towards me. So I think just like having access to someone that can really help you, or like a professional really does help, or a mentor, someone who knows what they're talking about. I think that's the best way to try to help. And then if that's not like accessible, or maybe it's not, you can only do it like once a month or anything, I think just like learning about stories and strategies that other kids use. So like online or something, especially now when you can just Google a bunch of people who have OCD and there's like a million stories. I think it can be really like inspiring, or it can just teach you new things about how to help your OCD and help you realize that it's not there forever and it goes away.
And that you're also not alone.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big thing. That's huge to know that, like a lot of people have a similar issue where they feel like nobody else is going through this, nobody else has this, and then as soon as they find somebody else that is dealing with it, whether it's a kid or adult or an online story or a book, it's something like, oh, wait a minute, there are others like me, and maybe I can fight as well.
Yeah, I think like realizing that you're not alone, it definitely helps you take like the first step into thinking, okay, well now that other people have done it, I can definitely do it. And so it's easy. It's a lot easier to focus on working on it.
Thanks, Vanna, for the comment. Thanks, Danica, and the person who's typing in Gloria's. I'm not a trained therapist, neither is Sharif, but hopefully you are. You can. There are a lot of resources out there to find a therapist if you need to, and I will say it's not easy to fight with OCD, as Sharif will tell you, but he's certainly able to kind of get on top of it now, and things are better for him, even though you still kind of deal with it and think about that every day, right? Is this an OCD thought or is it not?
Yeah, I think those kind of, after like all the tics go away, or like maybe like the tics are like the big ones go away, I think it's more of like the thoughts. I think it's like the thoughts that kind of incorporate your way into your thinking that like never leave after you have OCD, or maybe they like leave you for like a year or something, but then there's just one instance where something triggers it and they come back. But yeah, sometimes I'd always have to, maybe I'm thinking of something that maybe I don't think is OCD, but I need someone else to remind me that, yeah, are you sure that's not OCD talking? Or yeah.
It's a thing you have to continue to deal with. Sharif, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a good rest of December.
I hope you do too. It's really fun talking.
And thanks for joining us. Tell your dad I'm going to email. Actually, I'll email you a way you can watch the film right now. And I know we sent it to you, but I can't wait for you to see it. And everybody else, thank you for joining. This is Unstuck Kids Speak Out, episode 2 with Sharif. If there are any questions right now, we'll take a last one or two, and then I got to let Sharif go because it's probably dinner time where you are, right?
Yeah.
And I'm having my morning coffee. That's the cool thing about technology.
Yeah.
We can talk halfway around the world, and it's morning for me, and it's night for you.
Yeah. It's really cool.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining you. Sharif, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is really fun talking.
Any last words you want to say to people?
I don't know, just that there's some little things that, like, if OCD, like, not even like OCD, but just like little things that you're focusing on, I think just remembering that they always go away is something that really helped me. And that just in the like grand scheme of things, you do so many things, and that one thing that you did that maybe you're focusing on is just like a tiny little like drop of water.
I love it. These little OCD bits of kid wisdom. That's great. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you next month on Unstuck Kids Speak Out. Sharif, have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great one. Thanks for joining in. If you want to leave comments here, I will continue to answer questions during the day. And it was great for everyone to join, and feel free to share this out. And if you're watching on the replay, also add a comment. We'll keep this going and try to help as many people as possible. I'll see you next month. This is Chris from the producer of Unstuck Kids Speak Out. Have a good one.